to share with you another story that we've been working on. And it follows that garment factory fire in Bangladesh that killed more than 1,000 people. It appears that many Canadians are starting to think differently about the clothing they wear. We have a new exclusive CTV poll that shows most of us are willing to pay a little extra for clothing that is made with worker safety in mind. To talk about that poll and the ramifications, I'm joined from Vancouver by Jim Sinclair. He is president of the BC Federation of Labour. Jim, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. It's been
glad to be here.
It's been kind of a busy day on the news front, but we wanted to get this polling because it affects a lot of people. So let's take a look, first of all, at how many Canadians say they are willing to pay more. And that is 71% of Canadians are willing to pay a little extra to improve conditions. And you can see where we fit in when it comes to Sweden, Norway, and Australia all being a little bit more willing. Then when we looked at how people feel about boycotting clothing because of worker conditions, you can see where we stand when we look at that board. If we can pull that up right now. Yeah, there you go. We still fall to number 8 under several of the other countries. And then when we asked about a higher number of people who think workers are being taken advantage of, I can show you that that is what they believe, that workers are indeed being taken advantage of. 85% of Canadians feel that. So when we look at these findings, Jim, it clearly points to an argument that Canadians are willing to pay a little bit more. They do think there's some disadvantages there. The bottom line question is, do you think it will make any difference?
Well, I think it makes a huge difference to retailers who are looking at their markets. When Canadians are saying overwhelmingly, I don't want to walk into the clothes store or the retailer and buy my kids' clothes and know the blood of workers in other countries are on that clothes. I want to know that when I buy those kids' clothes, that in fact they're made by people who are treated with respect, paid fairly, and they don't walk into debt traps that collapse and kill 1,000 people. So very strong message there, and a very hopeful message that Canadians realize that they're responsible for what happens in other countries if we're buying those goods. They're actually working for us.
Do you think, though, that to say it is one thing, to do it is another?
Well, I think to do it, Canadians are willing to do it and would be willing to do it. I would also point out that the question is, should we pay more as consumers? The other question, obviously, is should companies make mega profits on this exploitation, or should they cut their profits? Loblaws being a perfect case in point, the Joe brand being built in the factory that collapsed. Their profits went up 40% this quarter. They made $500 million last year. So maybe they should pay some of the cost of treating their working fairly and making sure people aren't dying making their goods.
Loblaws was one of the companies that came out after the Bangladesh tragedy to talk about how it's going to step up its procedures for monitoring these companies. You're saying, or what I hear you're saying, is that's simply not enough. They should be cutting some of their profits and funneling that down.
Well, I think they should pay the standards and worry about the profits and the price of the goods later. But the standards should be upheld no matter what the profit margin is. And so what they've done, and I'll give Loblaws credit, they've signed the Bangladesh Safety Agreement, which has been signed by over 50 organizations, endorsed by the UN Secretary General, and it actually has independent monitoring, independent inspections, and an obligation, for the first time in history, a legal obligation by the companies who sign it to make sure that their workers are not super exploited or in unsafe conditions. That's a very positive development. Unfortunately, they're the only Canadian company to have signed it. Canadian Tire has not signed it. Hudson Bay has not signed it. The Gap, Walmart, many other processors or big companies have not signed that agreement. And I think that's ultimately the answer, not boycotting. Boycotting sends the message. But the result is we just want to know the standards are imposed. And unless the government's willing to impose those standards, which is obviously the best way to go, then we have to make sure through these agreements that they're imposed.
Jim Sinclair, president of the BC Federation of Labour, thank you for your time today.